1830 was a year of revolution in Europe. Belgium, France, Switzerland, and in Greece, the struggle to independence from the Ottoman Empire was finally successful. And in this dramatic year, Poland was no exception. In this programme, we look at the November 1830 revolution, which gave the Poles 9 months of freedom, of independence, the only 9 months they had between the third partition of Poland in 1795 and the re-emergence of the Polish state after the First World War in 1918. Join us on Poland Daily History for this dramatic story. In terms of did the government or the political figures, would they have envisaged restoring a constitution very like the one which they had after the formation of the Congress Kingdom, which actually was probably quite a liberal, as you said earlier, quite a liberal constitution with an elected Sejm and all those sorts of things. They had this. Generally, they were fired by this idea of liberty that was sweeping across Europe.
I mean, the idea of regaining independence was a priority, was preponderant. The form of government, I mean, there were opinions varied. Generally, the thing that was left undone in those days was that the Polish government didn't do anything, in fact, or very little, to help the peasants, who were, the majority of Polish population, and they realized that. I mean, Polish politicians realized that they made a mistake only after the collapse of the uprising, and then in turn they would propose. I mean, most of them were in Paris at that time. I mean, after the uprising, we'll get to that. They would propose a very, very advanced social program. So that was the mistake. So that was the mistake that was made. Very little was made to help the peasants.
Well, exactly. So because you didn't. So that was obviously a missed opportunity in terms of support. But if we can just go back to the sort of the military aspects of the revolution. We had that major battle which you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. What happened next? What did the generals have an overarching strategy as to how to defeat the Russians, or were they just responding to this larger army moving towards them?
The latter, I would say. I mean, the supreme commander at that time, I mean, after the Battle of Grochów, who was the General Skrzynecki, it's awful to pronounce, was following a very, very, I would say, Fabian tactics. I would put it this way. I mean, he didn't believe in the success of the uprising.
I mean, and you think that you make an interesting point, because a lot of them were sort of started off that, oh well, we can't seriously take on Russia as this state of Poland. But do you think, in actual fact, if there had been a bit more belief in that they might actually have prevailed?
Too little belief. That is another aspect of the uprising.
Which is rather unusual when you think of sort of Polish uprisings, that there would be too little belief. I mean, you would rather expect there to be too much belief.
I mean, there is a huge difference between the commandment and and soldiers or officers. I mean, the leadership was very, in fact, I mean, they really didn't believe that it was possible to win anything. But of course they couldn't. I mean, they wanted to have to maintain control over the army, and they knew they had to do something in order not to get killed for treason. But it was it was little. I mean, there was a campaign that was launched in spring. That was the so-called campaign against the guards, the Russian guards, commanded by Tsar's brother. But yet again, I mean, it was always too slowly, too.
Because I think at the outset there had been this idea put forward that in actual fact they should try and do the fighting in Lithuania, or what that part, rather than actually take the Russians on sort of further forward.
They sent troops to Lithuania too late. Because in the time to do this was before the Russians, get organized, and when there is a huge support in Lithuania. There were some attempts to enter Ukraine, but then again it was
a little half-hearted.
Yeah, and half-hearted, very good.
Yeah, and a little late. Because I did remember, in some of my reading on the subject, that despite the disparity in the size of the Polish army and the Russian army, the Russians themselves were also slightly they were not fighting in such a way that they were unstoppable. It was conceivable that the Poles could have defeated them militarily, notwithstanding this disparity in numbers, notwithstanding the fact that the Polish army was 30% of new recruits compared to hardened soldiers. So it is interesting, isn't it, when you think about the what-ifs of history. But if we could just go back to the Battle of Grochów, then what happened militarily following that battle?
After the battle, a contingent, let's say, was sent eastwards, and they had. They fought 3 battles of Wawer, Dębe Wielkie, and Iganie. That is March, April. But then again, I mean, after the victory at Iganie, I mean, every heart was pumped to march forward, because there was a chance, but the General Skrzynecki I mentioned would say no, because it's too risky.
Yes, but the general leading that battle was, I think, his specialisation militarily was fortifications. So do you think that might actually have led to a slightly defensive frame of mind in terms of the way you fight the battle? Or am I reading too?
Maybe.
Am I reading too much into the psychology of it?
It's interesting. I've never thought about it. I mean, maybe. I mean, this is it's like we say that. Because of the fact that Napoleon was a general of the artillery, I mean, he put so much interest in, making new cannons and so on and so on, and he believed that artillery is the force that thanks to which one wins battle.